We're good.
So did everybody get a resource sheet? I'll be referring to this later when we talk about the methods and techniques of screencasting. So be sure to keep that handy. So the title of my presentation is Screencasting in the ESL Writing Classroom. So my name is Aaron Royer. I work at St. John's University. I teach ESL there. All skills, but this session and in the past few sessions I've been focusing on writing. So during this presentation we'll talk about, we'll define screencasting. Some of you know what that is. Some of you have used it. Some of you might use it a lot. Some of you might have no idea. So hopefully everybody will walk away with a solid understanding of what it is and how you can use it in your classroom. It's something that I've been using for quite some time now, maybe 4 years. I have had success with it, and I think you'll see that today when I talk about some action research results that I recently got from a study. So the kind of the agenda, I'll start by talking about just kind of general feedback techniques. I'll ask what some of you do, and then we'll talk about conferencing in particular. Then we'll kind of segue into screencasting, this technique, talk about what it is, what some of the benefits of it are, and then we'll talk about kind of the nuts and bolts, how I do it, what my process is. Maybe some of you already do it, and maybe I have a somewhat different process. It's something that I've kind of honed over the years, and I think it's pretty efficient. And I'll do a quick demonstration as well to show you how quick this can be done. And then I'll end by talking about some action research that I recently completed and the results of that action research. So feedback, right? So we often look like this, in the feedback process. We all know it's really important, but it can be frustrating. We don't always see a clear connection between the feedback that we give and students' revisions. And there are lots of different approaches to it. I saw some great sessions earlier, and everybody has a different approach. It might be slightly different. There are some radical differences. But it's always kind of, a conundrum when you're figuring out what is the best way, what is the best medium to give feedback in. Some people give written feedback. This is another option we're going to talk about today, audio, video feedback. But there are lots of options. So, I heard some of the earlier sessions, some people talked about rubrics, using error logs and symbols. What kinds of feedback techniques do you use? What are some of your techniques in your classroom for writing, giving feedback on writing after a first draft or at any point? Donna?
I made a rubric with, actually it's more comprehensive than zeroing in on one thing. I have about 20 different points, and I made up this for myself, and I have the students do peer review. Mm-hmm. I explain the chart. I give it to the students, they write their piece, and then they are told how to just check off what they see is wrong in their neighbor's piece. Okay, then I say, okay, when you're done, then you come to me. So the two of them come to the desk, and then I analyze it and tell them, did you see what he did here? Yes, I see. And so that's what I do.
Okay. So you use a rubric, you use lots of peer feedback. This is done in class, yes. Oftentimes, okay?
Yes.
Anybody else with a different approach? How do you give feedback?
In addition to rubrics and error logs, we also conference with students.
Okay.
One-on-one. Okay,
conferencing is a pretty popular technique. Symbols you mentioned as well. I know a lot of teachers give written feedback in the form of symbols. I think conferencing is great. We're going to talk about it in a second. What are some of the issues you encounter when you conference with students?
Oh, no,
no, I was going to say the
Oh,
issues
different.
with giving feedback on their papers
Okay.
for me is if I do the errors
Mhm.
and the comments, they go for the errors and they ignore the comments.
Okay, so a focus on sort of the micro.
Yeah, the bigger stuff that they need to think about, reorganization, content, that kind of,
Right.
and they just go and they do the nitty-gritty for
Right, right. And research has shown that often teachers focus on that more, so, that might be, those might be habits, acquired over the years. So they tend to focus on the small stuff.
I think one of my issues with conferences is fitting it into my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a commute into Columbia and back.
Right.
And so, I've tried various methods of Skype or other ways to video conference, but I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say for that kind of situation.
Right. So, here are just some things that teachers use, holistic comments, rubrics, conferences last here. I think this is one of the things that I've encountered as well, the logistics of it. I think conferences are great. There are lots of benefits of conferences. One of the big issues with conferences is, the logistics, and we'll talk about that in a minute. That's one problem I've run into. So, of course, conferences, one-on-one meetings where you talk about the students' papers and kind of guide them in their revisions. There are many benefits to this. Research has shown that it increases rapport with students. You can kind of create individual dialogues with students that you can't really get with written feedback. Of course, more thorough feedback. If you're there personally speaking to the student, you can explain things, especially content issues, in much more detail. And there's research that has shown it's led to better revisions. So in this study by Bishner, Young, and Cameron, they found that rule-based grammar, I think they looked at specifically past simple and definite articles, that the revisions of those grammatical structures are improved with the use of conferences. So there are benefits of conferences. But the issue is, how do we arrange and find the time? They can be done in class, but then what are the other students doing? You have one eye on the student you're working with, and you have to make sure everybody else is doing something. Or if you're doing them outside of class, arranging them, it can be difficult as well. So I think that's one of the big problems is logistics. This is where screencasts can be useful. A screencast, what is it? It's basically a video of everything that's happening on your screen, on your computer screen. So you hit record, and every mouse movement that you make, every document that you bring up on the screen, every sound that you make, provided that you have a microphone, I think all computers do nowadays, will be recorded. So just basically everything you're doing on the screen is recorded. And this gives us many possibilities for feedback. We can bring up the student's paper, we can highlight things, we can type in comments, and just as we do in conferences, we can give them more thorough feedback. We can explain things in more detail. And I'll talk about some of the benefits in a minute. But I just wanted to show you a sample. It's not, unfortunately, it's kind of small here. I know that you can't see any details, but let's see. So let's play this quickly. Hi, Julia. Overall, you did a really good job. As you can see here at the bottom. So you can see, when I scroll, everything that's happening there. Everything that's happening is recorded. My voice, any movements I make with the page, with the mouse, everything is recorded. So that's basically what a screencast is. So some of the benefits that I found. So it shares many of the same benefits of conferencing. It's not exactly the same, obviously. It's not two-way, right? The student can't ask you questions. It's asynchronous, right? So it's not exactly the same. But you can give more in-depth explanations of content, organization, coherence, cohesion, and of course the smaller things as well, grammatical issues, lexical issues. You can explain them in more detail than you would be able to do with a writing-based system, for example, symbols. It's an artifact that students can keep, and this might be one of the benefits that screencasting has over conferencing, that the students can keep this. They can listen to it as many times as they need to, and they can go back to it. If they make a similar mistake in future papers, they can go back and they can listen again to hear that explanation. It's something that they can keep, and kind of a side benefit, it's listening practice. We have, our students are ESL students, so it's a listening exercise as well, which also makes it really an intermediate and above activity, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation. It leads to better rapport, and this is something that I've informally found over the years of using this, and also in this study cited here by Moore and Assis, they found that when they administered a survey, they didn't use screencasting, they used audio feedback. Similar, audio feedback. And they found that, I think 98% of the students preferred audio feedback to written feedback, and that, that many students thought that it kind of decreased the space between them and the teacher. So in other words, it helped to build rapport. And it's something that I found in my classes as well. And they also found that it leads to better revisions, audio-based feedback. So there are benefits of using it. So one of the biggest questions I get when I tell people about this technique is, how long does it take? Because when you first think about this, it might seem a little bit daunting, that it might take a lot of time, more time than a written-based system. And I found that it really doesn't. Like anything, it takes time to get used to kind of get used to the software, to get used to the process. But I found that it really doesn't. In my own case, it doesn't take longer for me to give screencasted feedback than it does to give written feedback. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. So the audio is actually replacing what you would normally be scribbling on students' paper.
You can do both.
Well, that was my question.
Yeah,
because if it's both, it's going to be more time than what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could not have to write all over their paper and just talk it through,
Mm-hmm.
that would make sense to me. But to do both would be a
Well,
lot of work.
yeah. When I say you can do both, I mean you can make small comments. You can highlight things within the document. You don't have to make the kinds of comments that you would make if they were standalone, if there were no audio component. But if you want to make a quick note, and I'll show you in my demonstration, but if you want to make a quick note, just type a few words, you can do that as well. But I definitely don't give comprehensive written feedback when I do screencasting. I might make a note here or there, or highlight something within the document so that they know, or can easily access it when they go back.
I found that when I give online feedback to students, in other words, they give me electronically a paper and then I give them feedback, I and another one of my colleagues who are doing upper level writing, we get not as good revisions as when we physically write on the page, underline it, make the symbol, do something. They don't seem to pay attention to it in the same way, maybe because they're reading it on their iPhones and typing, I don't know what. But marking the paper seems to be the most efficient. But after that, if as I do a holistic sort of narrative of the different aspects of the writing, that part would be eliminated by the speaking. Is that, that could be one way to... Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you say online feedback, are you talking about online written feedback?
Yeah, written feedback.
Okay.
Yeah. So I stopped doing that and I went back to the page and writing on the page that seemed to have better attention focus. And But what I was thinking is, just in experience, it takes me a while to think what I want to say holistically as a narrative to students. I don't know if I could just, click the thing, open my mouth, and talk.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely, yeah. I wish I could. I definitely can. But in the next slide, I'm going to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts. But definitely need to carefully read the paper before you hit record. There's no doubt about that. You can't get around that. And when I often, when I read the paper the first time, I always ask for digital copies. Again, I'll talk about that in the next slide. But I'll highlight things, that I want to talk about in the recording, to kind of mark my place. But I definitely don't do comprehensive written feedback when I'm doing the audio component. That replaces it. If there's something I want to point out, I might make a comment, but it's very short, and it's it's probably not even a complete sentence, a couple of words. When I do the demonstration later, I'm going to do a very short demonstration, and there won't be any real feedback there. But I just want to show you the process and how simple it really can be. Hopefully it will work on this computer. This is not my computer, but I did test it. So kind of the nuts and bolts. Getting set up, you of course need a digital copy of your students' papers. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk about Google Drive, which I also use to share the videos. And this is also a way to get a digital copy. With every class that I teach, I always set up a Google Drive for that class. And it's a good way for me to exchange documents and videos or other things with my students. Things that I make, videos that I make. It's just really efficient, it's easy, it's drag and drop. So in any case, you need to get a digital copy. If you have them handed in your class, you could scan it. That's another way you could scan it. You just need to get their writing onto your computer. And you'll need a microphone. As I said, I think all computers these days come with microphones, so I don't think that's a big issue. And then you have to think about making the video. And on this resource guide, I listed some of the options out there. By far, my favorite option is Screencast-O-Matic. I think that it's overall it's the best piece of software on here. I also focused on free pieces of software. Camtasia and others, they charge. So these are all free. The reasons that I like Screencast-O-Matic, number one, probably the biggest, is that you can record up to 15 minutes. The limitations of the others, Screener, Jing, the third one, is that you can only record 5 minutes. And I use this with intermediate and above classes, so invariably they are more than 5 minutes. So I'm really not able to use those. Another thing I like about Screencast-O-Matic is that they have both a desktop-based version, in other words, one that you download and install on your computer, but they also have a web-based version. So you don't have to install anything on your computer to use that. You can just go to the website, click record, and it will begin recording your screen, and then you download the video after it's done to your desktop, or you can upload it to YouTube as well. So this is my favorite. I really find this one to be the best out of the four that are listed. On the back, there's another one, actually, QuickTime Player for Mac users here. Only the Mac version has a screen recording feature as well, and of course, it's already installed on Macs. It's free and it's unlimited time. So.
Can the students receive it if they don't have a Mac?
You could save it in a format, MP4. Usually, students will be able to open that if they, the good thing about using Google Drive, which I'll talk about when I talk about sharing videos, is that you can watch them online. So in your browser, you don't have to download it.
Sorry, if you're using a Mac, would that be the only one to use, or I could still use this?
Oh, you could use any of these, as well. They all have Mac versions. This particular one, number 4, this comes only on Mac, this QuickTime Player. So these are all options. Again, I would recommend the first one. That's the one that I always use. Once you have once you've picked a piece of Screencast software, then it's just a matter of making the video. And you want to kind of adhere to best practices. You can use the same kinds of methods that you would use in giving written feedback. Do you want to give them direct feedback? In other words, correct things for them? Do you want to give them indirect feedback, guiding them in the direction of the correction? Triage. Do you want to talk about every single thing in their paper, or do you want to really focus on the important errors, the ones that obscure meaning or the content issues? So all of these kinds of best practices that we adhere to in other media of feedback, we want to adhere to here as well. And you want to keep them to a reasonable length. Again, it depends on the length of the paper. If you're dealing with a shorter paper, of course, you don't have as much to talk about, so the video is going to be shorter. In the past couple of sessions, I've been dealing with, probably B2, B1 students. So, my videos have tended to be around 7 or 8 minutes. And some of the longer essays in the B2 class, maybe they're a little longer. But you have up to 15 minutes here, so that doesn't become a big issue. But you also want to keep them shorter because the students, you don't want them to, turn the video off. You want to keep it, keep it to a reasonable length. I think they're less likely to watch the whole thing and be able to understand it if it's too long. So once we've chosen our piece of software, we've made the video, now we have to think about how to share it. As I said, I set up a Google Drive for all of my classes, so it will look something like this. I make a folder, recording software, so it really has nothing to do with Word.
So in other words, what I put up there is basically what you see. Is
what you see, exactly. Yeah. So if you see track changes on the screen, that's what it will record. Yeah. So everything that you see on the screen, you will see, whether it's a document, whether it's a video, mouse movements, everything will be recorded.
How much time does it take for the students to get acclimated to this process? How much time do you spend training them on what you're going to be doing?
Well, I always talk about it in the first class. I know that in all of my classes I use Google Drive. So if they're continuing students, they're familiar with Google Drive already, and a lot of them already use it for other purposes. So in terms of the actual technology, I don't think there's much much acclimation. In the first class, I always go over it. I tell them what kinds of feedback they're going to get, and we talk about setting up the Google Drive and how they can access it and all of that. But
so they adjust pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's what I found. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm dealing with intermediate and above students. But yeah, I haven't run into too many problems. There are issues, and sometimes I'll have to, have the students stay after class, and I'll bring the Google Drive up on the screen and show them, what they need to do. But by and large, it's not too big a learning curve. Did you have a question?
No, I was just going to say, why do you like Google Drive better than Dropbox? I'm in Dropbox.
Oh, you're a Dropbox. Well, for a couple of reasons. I like that all the Google applications are there. You can make documents there. You can edit documents there.
So it's a broader.
Right. Google has tons of different applications, and they're all integrated. Google does a really good job of that. So I like that. I like it for that reason. And you get more storage, although 2 gigabytes. If you're using it only for this, I can't imagine using more than 2 gigs.
Dropbox just raised their to match. I think they just raised it up so that they match Google's space on the drive.
Okay.
So they're offering a terabyte now too for $10 a month.
Okay. All right. So I guess that's not a big issue now. And even 2 gigs would probably be enough if you're dealing only with these things and not with other kinds of things. Okay. So if you have any other questions, we can talk about them later. So some potential pitfalls. It can be time consuming at first until you kind of get the hang of it and get the process down, but it really is efficient once you get used to it, and time shouldn't be too much an issue. It's really difficult to use with low-level students. I've never and wouldn't try this with novice level students, maybe, on the ACTFL scale, maybe intermediate low and above. On the Cepher scale, maybe, B1, maybe A2 and above, depending on the group of students. But, it's definitely not for beginners. This is an intermediate and above technique. And there are tech issues sometimes. Yeah. In every part of our lives, including this, right, we run into tech issues. They might not have something installed on their browser to play the videos. They might not, if they might not have proper software on their desktop to play the videos. So this happens, and it takes time at first, at the beginning of the session, to kind of troubleshoot these things. So as with all technology, this can happen. So let me do this demonstration before I start talking about the action research. So I have here one of my students let me use her paper. So these are some of my students' journals, which I don't screencast feedback for. I actually don't give very much feedback for the journals, but this is just an example. So I have my documents here. I'll bring this up, this piece of writing, in the browser. It's a Google Doc. I can bring it up and edit it as a Google Doc there. So there I have it on my screen. I'm at screencasting.com, my favorite piece of software. I don't work for them, I swear. This is the home page. When you go to the home page, this is what it looks like. You hit start recording. Record screencast. So launching recorder. Okay. Oops. This is very delicate with this mouse. It's very sensitive. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it will look like that. It will come up. Actually, with Screencast-O-Matic, you can record both the screen and webcam. So you could have your face there. Yeah. If that's something if you want your students to see you more than they already do, you can use that. Then we go back to the document. I haven't started recording yet. There's the document, and I hit record. There. So we get the countdown here. We'll start recording, so everything that I'm saying right now is being recorded. As I said, this is a Google Doc, so you can edit it right in here. You can highlight things just as you would in Word. I can go here, highlight that. I can insert a quick comment, and this is what I mean when I talk about comments. I don't mean writing like a holistic paragraph at the end. Just inserting, something there and putting that there, some quick comment, which makes more sense than that, but usually, a few words there. And then when we're done, we go down here, we press done at the bottom of the screen, and then we have a few options. Actually, you can publish it right to YouTube from Screencast-O-Matic, but I usually save it as a video file. So we'll save it to your desktop, the video. Okay. And so there's the file, it's saved on the desktop. And then I go back to my Google Drive. Okay, this is my student Kimmy's folder. So I will go to this folder, drag and drop the file and it's there. So she can now watch the video. So you know, the process is pretty efficient. You know, everything can be done right from your browser. You save the video to your desktop, then drag and drop it into Google Drive. You know, when I first started doing this, you know, cloud storage wasn't a buzzword at that point. So, you know, sharing it was a bit more of an issue. But now with, you know, Dropbox and Google Drive, you know, that really takes that problem away. And I use, you know, these things for, as I mentioned, you know, for really all of my classes. It's a great way to share files. Any questions about that before we move on to the action research that I recently did? Yeah.
I was just going to ask if you've interviewed your students about their preferences for feedback. Are they?
Yeah, actually, that's part of the action research. So I'll mention that in just a couple of minutes. Yep.
Do students ever screencast you back?
I've never tried that. You know, I would imagine you would run into a few more tech issues if you started to do that. But it would be, yeah, that would be interesting, you know, or doing like peer feedback or something.
I can just imagine somebody deciding to do it on their own, you know, not necessarily get this official assignment.
Right.
I feel like if you've done it and then they've got a question about what to type or what to say, they could do the same thing and send it back to you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've never tried that, kind of creating a dialogue. Yeah. No, I've never done that. You know, I think that that would be really interesting. The tech part of it, even though it's, you know, as you saw, the software is not too hard to operate, but you know, to make sure all students are on the same page might be a little hurdle, but yeah, it's interesting. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, so
Aaron, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
How do you handle student questions? Is it something, do they email you? Do you talk to them in the next class if they're confused about something, or?
Yeah, usually, you know, if there are issues, some student didn't understand something from the video that I pointed out, I usually handle it in class. Although that's an interesting idea to, you know, maybe handle it, you know, as a dialogue online and have them either record their questions or write their questions in a document or something. You could create a document and that could be, you know, a running list of questions. But yeah, usually what I've done in the past is address them in class. You know, I'll leave some time, you know, maybe at the beginning or end of class where students can ask me about their writing or the feedback that I've given them. So I wanted to figure out, you know, I kind of informally have observed that students have liked this. I've gotten comments from students about this. They've been impressed by it. I had one student one time who had just moved to the United States from Japan who, you know, sent the videos to his parents because he was so impressed by, you know, the fact that he was getting video feedback from his teachers. And I've gotten some positive feedback on my course evaluations about these as well. So so kind of informally, I've gotten some good feedback about it. And of course, there's some negative issues, you know, the tech issues in particular. Some students, you know, they're just not able to overcome those issues. But what I wanted to know, basically, in this action research, is this more effective than kind of the alternative, or one of the alternatives, giving kind of more traditional, written, symbol-based feedback? And if so, for which categories of errors? And what are students' opinions of this as well? So I've gotten, you know, random comments here and there in different places about it, and it seems that most of it's positive, but you know, in an anonymous environment, what do they think about it? So the participants, you know, the number is low here. It's action research, kind of, you know, to inform my own practices. It was 12 students in a low advanced, you know, roughly B2 ACTFL advanced low class, academic writing class. And basically, students, we write a series of essays. You know, so the two essays that I looked at, the first one was an argumentative essay. I gave feedback here, more traditional symbol-based feedback. You know, I had a list of symbols, which the students also had. They had kind of on the kind of the macro features of the writing. And then on the second essay, I gave them screencasted feedback on the second essay. So just in the way that I've been talking about. So they watched or read this feedback. I answered any questions that they had in class, and they revised and handed in their second draft. They also completed, after this process was done, I sent out a survey question, just in the form of a Google form, anonymous, and they had to fill out that form and submit it as well. So the way that I analyzed the data was I actually used the method from Moran and Cease's article, which I referenced earlier. They categorized the errors into 5 categories: content, organization, coherence, and cohesion, lexical issues, grammar, and mechanics. Okay. So I categorized each of the errors into those 5 areas. And then I calculated the number of successful revisions. So I looked at the first draft, I looked at the second draft, and I tried to see what was this issue that I pointed out in the first draft successfully corrected in the second draft. Okay, and I then calculated percentages. And what I found, I actually didn't put the raw data up here, but in content, I found that in the content area, I found that 13% more of the corrections were successful for screencasted feedback. I found that for organization, coherence, and cohesion, 6% were more effective. 4% for lexical errors, grammar errors 5%, and mechanics -1%. So actually written feedback was slightly more effective there, but it was actually not a significant result. So I used then Wilcoxon's single sign rank test, which we use to compare paired samples. And I found that all of the results, all these percentages that I just read, were significant except the mechanics difference. So basically this P number means that it's the probability that you would see these differences if there were no effect. So as you can see, it's all less than 5% probability except for the last one. So there's this, the conclusion here is that there is a significant effect I found with videos over symbol-based written feedback. Is there a question, John?
A tiny question. What do you feel is the difference between grammar and mechanics?
Well, mechanics here is defined as, punctuation.
Okay.
Issues. Grammar is more.
Okay.
So grammar is more.
Right.
Verb tenses, for example. Past simple or something,
Okay.
or articles would be another example.
Okay. Thanks.
And so the survey results, the information that I got from the survey, actually only 11 students submitted the survey. But I found that, overwhelmingly that the students had positive use of the feedback. Some of the the screencasted feedback. Some of the comments that I got, they understood their mistakes better. They can see the video many times. It's an interesting way to get feedback. You could understand his grammar errors better.
Did they explain why?
I didn't get much detail, unfortunately. I got, a few sentences here and there, but I didn't get much detail in the way of, reasons. And, one person mentioned they had tech issues. Yeah. You have no question? Okay. Yeah.
I can see them many times, but if you give them a piece of paper, they can see that many times too. What did they mean by that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, they can listen to it many times. Yeah.
Like what you said before, when you're doing one-on-one, it's just the only chance that they get to really hear your explanation.
Right. So maybe in a conference.
As opposed to a conference.
Perhaps. Yeah. Or if you're explaining something to them in class about a symbol or something, it's kind of fleeting. They wouldn't be able to. That could be. Okay, so my conclusions were that in my own class that it's been effective, and it's what I've kind of backed up my what I've observed over the years of using this, and that students like it, and as I mentioned, some students are impressed by it as well. So those were kind of the conclusions of my action research. So going to kind of conclude here. I hope that you learned a new technique that you can use in your toolkit for giving feedback. It might not work for everybody. It's something that I've been using for a while and that and my students have enjoyed. So I hope you'll try this out at some point in the future. Are there any final questions? I know I addressed some questions throughout the presentation, but yeah, Sue.
Aaron, I'm wondering if with the sound recording, now I know, what is it with Siri or something on my cell phone, or if it's voice to text, it can take voice and make text out of it. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that Screencast may develop something like that, if it doesn't exist already, where students could also get the tape script? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm thinking of,
so if they're listening issues,
and so then they could also get subtitles as well, which would be so useful.
Yeah, I mean, well, as anybody who has tried to use voice to text knows, it's kind of imperfect.
But maybe this is an idea for Screencast, and you could talk to them about developing it, adding it.
It's an interesting point. I think that it would definitely be beneficial if they could have a transcript and they could see, read as well as listen, because I'm sure there are points where they can't understand, a word or a couple of words, and if they can.
Then you could even maybe bring it down to some of those lower level students.
Right, right. Yeah. It's definitely good scaffolding for, So yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think that I haven't used voice to text recently. I know when I tried using it the last time, it was very imperfect, but I think that it's an interesting idea. I think it would definitely be beneficial if you can get a good transcript without spending, an automatic good transcript without spending additional time. I think it could be beneficial.
I know this is a writing conference, but have you tried using this with audio recordings or presentations that students have done in class, like video recording the presentation and then screencasting it?
I haven't done that. I've given audio feedback on presentations. In listening speaking classes. I've never done a screencasting. That's an interesting idea to have, to record the video and then upload the video because, again,
you could pause it at certain parts and point out.
Yeah.
I've always found with audio recordings when I'm getting feedback on them, it's hard to pinpoint the exact location. You have to go find the time.
Right.
It's a very laborious process, but you could pause it and then provide feedback and continue with the video.
That's a really interesting idea. Yeah, I've never tried it, but I think I might. That's interesting. Any other questions?
You use this mainly or only with your students at St. John's?
Actually, I was at University of South Florida before. That's where I started using it. Yeah.
Have you done this with? I don't know if you even do this. I have 3 Skype students in Poland and a couple of writing students in Tokyo, and I'm thinking this could be a tool to use with them.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
so
this is.
People in remote locations.
No, I haven't. But I think that it would be really well suited for that. Yeah. You can really do it anywhere. That's right. Any other questions?
I think it's an SAT presentation skills, and what I usually do is take their speeches with a digital camera, go to the digital studio, and make movies out of them with a Mac, and they have to be a little bit compressed. They're only about 7 minutes long, and then I email those to the students.
Right.
But I'm not able to talk to them, have them evaluate them, and then we have a one-on-one.
Right. Yeah. Putting these 2 ideas together, I think screencasting could be a good way to do that. You can play the video on your screen, record with the screencasting software, and talk through different issues in the. You could pause the video at certain points and add your comments. Yeah.
Have you used VoiceThread? familiar with?
I used it for a project actually when I was in grad school. But I've never actually used it with my students. Storytelling.
Does it have the same capability as this, where being able to put the
It's been a while since I've used
document?
VoiceThread myself. I'm just thinking, especially talking about video, you can post video.
Right.
And then you can post
Right. VoiceThread could be a possibility for this, for giving feedback on videos. Yeah. I think that would be a good idea. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
In terms of actually marking the paper, I saw you doing some highlighting when you were demonstrating. Is that pretty much for marking? Is that most of what you do? Is just highlight things? Do you underline? Do you actually make changes in the paper, or is it just verbal and highlight?
I usually just highlight things with the mouse. So not permanent highlighting. Just highlighting whatever passage I'm talking about or word with the mouse. So I don't, when I did the demonstration here, I actually highlighted it in yellow, and that's permanent. But I oftentimes will just highlight the passage I'm talking about, and then I'll go on to another passage.
So it's not like they printed and have markings on it. It's just.
Well, they could. If you do the permanent highlighting, it would stay there, and that would print out with the document.
So they're submitting their essay to your Google Drive, and so that's what I'm thinking. With this draft, it's their original draft, their original digital draft. So if you were to mark it up, they'd have to go back and unmark it, or I'm just thinking about the draft process of their original.
You can copy it. You can copy it. You can make a copy and then,
Okay.
and then save the copy.